Hi, this is Pete from See Your Toes again, and this is podcast number 33. Today I have with me a guest who has had a hell of a life. It's all about mental illness. She was at one stage diagnosed with schizophrenia. The medications that she was on to try to control her mental illness had her put on a huge amount of weight. So at the worst scenario, she was 273 pounds, which works out at about 124 kilograms or 18 stone. She was a big lady. And it wasn't just the weight. The fact was the antidepressants hadn't helped. She was still in a bad place. Her knees had got so worn out from her weight that she couldn't walk on them, and she ended up needing them to be both operated on. And so her life was at a pretty torrid point when she decided to make a change. And a change she did. So she has managed to pull her life around. This is her story. Her name is Harmony. So part 1 is on podcast 33 and part 2 is on podcast 34. The total amount of time, I think, is about an hour and a half, so I've broken it up into 2 podcasts to make it easier for everybody. So sit back and enjoy. Thank you. Hello, Harmony. Thank you for joining my podcast. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete, for having me. Hopefully sharing my experience and my story helps someone.
Yeah. Now, I met you on X, Twitter, kind of by accident, I think. You and I were chatting to commenting on a post that somebody else put on, and you mentioned that you had a fairly unique mental illness as far as so can you explain that, please?
I was diagnosed with schizophrenia in 2008. Prior to that, though, I would say I displayed early symptoms of my illness as far back as junior high and high school with the cognitive processing difficulties and stuff like that. Didn't know what it was at the time. In my 20s, I experienced more paranoid thoughts, just with just people and stuff, just paranoid, and just overreacting and paranoia and stuff like that. And then fast forward to my 2006, and I just started having increased symptoms. And then within 2 years' time, I had my first psychotic episode where I was operating on no sleep, and my body was just dysfunctioning, and it just I had extreme paranoia, delusions, and just my cognitive processing was poor. It was very poor. Like if I read a paragraph, I'd have to reread that paragraph a million times to comprehend what it was trying to tell me when I was trying to read books to learn about like my thyroid disorder, which I was diagnosed in 2006. I don't think it's a coincidence that my thyroid was trying to regulate itself by putting up extreme numbers, and like my TSH was really low, and I was diagnosed with Graves' disease. I think the thyroid, in my opinion, is a warning sign that something's terribly wrong in your body, and it's trying to kind of compensate for whatever's wrong.
So did you have an overexcitable thyroid?
Mm-hmm. I had
so it was hyperthyroid.
Yeah, I had Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune
you mentioned that. Yeah.
Thyroid condition. And I actually had my thyroid removed in 2006. And then 2 years later, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I think my thyroid was trying to right what was going wrong in my body. And so I was diagnosed with schizophrenia in 2008, medicated, put on Invega to start with, and that really zonked me out. I couldn't keep my eyes open on that. It was obviously too powerful for me. Then I switched to Geodone and had been on that pretty much the whole duration of my illness, pretty much 16 years, because like I was only on Invega a short term upon initial diagnosis. And the Geodone worked really, really well in the beginning. It took away my psychotic episodes, but long-term usage of that really damaged me in the regards where like it created a lot of side effects that were intolerable to live with. Like when you can't honestly chew your food without choking, and coughing because you're having drug-induced Parkinson's. And when your smile disappears and you're trying to take a selfie for 6 months because you want to be like everyone else. You want to take the selfie. You want to have pictures of you smiling, and you realize that's virtually impossible. It was eye-opening to accidentally stumble upon metabolic therapies through diet and exercise and see the improvement. I can smile, and I've seen great improvements on the side effects of my medicine, but I've also noticed improvements of my schizophrenia, like my memory problems that I approached my psychiatrist with. And I said, my memory's really, really bad. What can I do? What I have to write down everything. I forget everything. I can't recall anything. At that point, I couldn't even recall my age if you were to ask me, because I would have to think, well, what year was I born, and tabulate and calculate. And the processing wasn't there. And so but she said, that's just the course of the disease. That's just what you have to live with. That's just what you have to live with. But luckily, by stumbling on metabolic therapies, I can recall my age. I'm 47.
Yeah. Okay. I was about to say, how old are you? So that's good. It's one of those tricky questions when you ask a lady how old they are. Could end up with you can't punch me, that's a good thing because we're in different countries. But, you could get upset if I say, how old are you? So you're 47 and you got this in 2008 properly, but you've had it all of your adult life, haven't you?
Yeah, I've had the struggles and the difficulties. It just, there wasn't an official diagnosis until I was delusional and seeing things and really.
That must have been terrible though, when you're growing up, like you said, as a late teenager and early adult and stuff, for anybody at any time of their lives, having that sort of, having your mind effectively working against you must have been horrible.
Yeah. I would say early on, I've always struggled with social anxiety and stuff like that, and so I even in my 20s, I took a job as a waitress so that I would force myself to talk to various new people every day. It was almost therapeutic in a way. So I've always been trying to find solutions to my problems.
That's impressive, getting yourself as a waitress, because I know most people, of course, who have any sort of anxiety, that would be the last thing you want to do is be a waitress. So I'm going to take my hat off to you for that.
Yeah. I guess I've always tried to better myself to some degree, but when the only choice presented to you is a medication that doesn't really do that and only made me worse long term because of the physical ailments of drug-induced Parkinson's and the side effects of the weight gain. And it never really made me clear the way the ketogenic diet has made me clear. And it just didn't improve me to the degree that I was hoping it would work, because when that's the only avenue that your doctors your treatment providers present to you, you lose hope. You lose hope.
Understandably. That's right. You mentioned drug-induced Parkinson's. Is that literally, because I don't know a lot about this, I don't know about the drugs for the likes of schizophrenia and so on. And is schizophrenia the right phrase? Because I've heard it being called schizophrenic, and I can't remember the other part of it.
Like there's various diagnoses of schizophrenia. Like you can have schizoaffective disorder and stuff like
disorder.
that. But it's all under, in my opinion, the umbrella term of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
I think I fall into the category of paranoid schizophrenia. And same with my father. He fell into that category as well. But there's not that much difference amongst any mental health care patient. I've seen very much similarities in us all. Like a lot of us suffer from chronic pain and autoimmune conditions and stuff like that increase swelling, which increases, guess what, pain, So there's a lot of common denominators, and there's a lot of multiple diagnoses of like multiple illnesses like bipolar and schizoaffective and anxiety and depression. But I think it's all an umbrella term. Like I don't think there's much that separates any of us, and I think they can all be treated the same.
That's right. And that's the problem with people who want to put something in a box. They want to give you a specific label. We're going to call you schizophrenic. Whereas, as you say, you could be schizophrenic with bipolar. You could, there's just never ending, because if the problem is metabolic, which I think we're going to address soon and say that it is, then if it's metabolic and your metabolism is screwed, then you're going to be screwed in all sorts of different directions, not just in one.
Yeah. I've had multiple instances where like I've been diagnosed as schizophrenic, but I've also had bouts with terrible anxiety, agoraphobia, depression. So like there's like, they're all very much under the same umbrella, mental illness, and it needs to be addressed the same way.
Yes, indeed. I've got a note here because I did write some notes down. Was there anything, and I hate reading notes. It's like people who put up, I know I'm deviating here. It's like people who do a PowerPoint presentation at work and they put up the PowerPoint presentation on the big screen and then they stand there in front of the class and read the PowerPoint present. It's like, you could have just sent that to me. You didn't have to stand here and waste my time. Send it to me. I'll read it in my good time. So I hate people who read notes. But was there anything in your life that seemed to trigger the illness? Or was it just something that brewed up over the years? I guess you've kind of answered that, haven't you? It just kind of brewed up, or was there, do you find when you were getting sort of relapses of it and stuff, were there triggers to your knowledge?
Well, anything that spikes the glucose could trigger it. So like stress can spike your glucose, pain can spike your glucose. Anything can be a trigger to mental illness. So like, even my nerves about coming on here could trigger my illness, especially if my medicine of my antipsychotic elevates my glucose. Anything could tip me over.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yes. And a lot of people and I think you did mention this a little bit just before too, when you were talking about symptoms, one of your symptoms was weight. And I've seen pictures of you on X where you've shown before and after shots. You got quite big at one stage there, didn't you? Was that was that, sorry, again, that's always another touchy subject. Was that because of the mental illness or because of the medication, or a bit of both?
I think it's medication, honestly. Because I still have schizophrenia But I'm utilizing metabolic therapies that actually work. And so like, I think it's medication, because like when I was taking the medicine, I ballooned up to that 273 pounds. And so that's a massive weight gain. And when I wasn't doing diet or exercise, I was just trusting the doctors that this is how it's treated. And it was ineffective. And the metabolic therapies allowed the side effects of the medicine to reduce, because they counteracted those massive weight gain symptoms.
Yeah. I can kind of understand why your body would put on weight too. If you're eating the same and these medications are designed to slow you down, make you tired, make your brain slow down, then they're going to make your metabolism slow down and you're going to put weight on, aren't you?
Yeah, and the medicine, the antipsychotics, those over time, they raise your glucose. And so what happens when your glucose raises and you're on them for long term, like I was for 16 years, is you develop a condition called metabolic syndrome. That metabolic syndrome will increase your weight by raising your glucose, and it'll increase the girth around your waist. Your waistband will increase. Your overall health quality of life, your overall health will lower, because like you'll put on massive visceral fat, and that visceral fat is linked to a lot of diseases and stuff like that. Like I had fatty liver. Well, probably because I was getting metabolic syndrome. I also had burning feet, which was burning nerve pain, because it was inducing a high state of glucose, which was creating metabolic syndrome and a diabetic-like condition where
I was about to say that's a diabetic condition, and as is, of course, metabolic syndrome and fatty liver. They're all diabetic symptoms, and that's all because of insulin resistance, and your poor old insulin's trying madly to reduce your blood sugar and losing, because your body has said, I'm not interested in you anymore, insulin. So yeah, that's all diabetic, isn't it? It's diabetes.
And so like, to answer your question, the weight gain was a result of the medicine, because I had all those other symptoms that were going wrong metabolically because of the medicine. So
that's terrible, because you start off with a mental health issue that's, really bad and is controlling your life. And then you have, and I'm not trying to put people off meds here, it's just a fact of it, is that it's one of those things where you go onto your meds to control your schizophrenic symptoms, but in the process, it's literally screwing your physical body up, terribly in the process.
Yeah, no, I'm a believer in meds. They work. Yeah. Especially in first episode psychosis. They really work. They're life-saving. They can get you to a place where then you can maybe implement diet and lifestyle as a more long-term treatment.
Yeah.
There is a time and place for those meds, and they are important, and they will always be important. But there needs to be better answers for long-term outcomes like mine. And I don't want the option of taking a GLP-1 drug. I don't want more side effects. A lot of people go on those drugs and they see great improvements. My brother-in-law was bipolar with psychotic episodes, and he was on medicine, Abilify, for years. Unemployable. Couldn't maintain a job. Would get a job, keep it for a month, quit. It was too much for him. And it's too much for a lot of patients to work. A lot of them, the vast majority of serious mental illness, are unemployable. They're on disability or they're just not working. And that's the sad truth. but he started taking a GLP-1 drug because his antipsychotic gave him metabolic syndrome, and he's employable. He's a teacher now. So those drugs, while they have massive side effects, and I don't want to opt for them, my story will be different than his, but it worked to improve his mental illness.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I've asked how the meds make you feel. I think that's pretty, I think you've kind of summed that up already. You could say that did you feel positive about the meds? This is back then when you were obviously you were large as well as mentally unwell. Did the meds make you feel better as far as mental is concerned?
Yes, they did make me feel better. As far as they took away my delusional thinking and my paranoia and stuff like that. They did up until when did they stop? They stopped working, I would say probably spring of last year. They stopped working for me. They no longer worked. And I like to think that the reason they stopped working is because they were inducing metabolic syndrome and raising my glucose too high, thus contributing to feeding my schizophrenia since they're metabolic and glucose fed. And so I think that even though trying to up my medicine to control my symptoms that started presenting when I laxed my diet and laxed my intermittent fasting last year. And it didn't work for me raising my meds because they were doing more harm than good over the course of taking them for 16 years. They raised my glucose too high to make them an effective treatment for me.
Okay. All right.
Without a GLP-1 drug.
Yeah. So what is a GLP-1 drug for people like myself who don't know? Just roughly.
It's like a metabolic drug they give to diabetics and stuff like that, or people that have metabolic syndrome. And a lot of times it's touted as being a weight loss drug or anti-aging drug, because if you think about it, glucose, anytime you elevate your glucose, you're feeding like a multitude of illnesses in your body.
Yes, including cancer, by the way, because cancer is I believe it's the only cell in a person's body that can't feed itself. It can't create its own energy, because every other cell in your body has those little critters called mitochondria in them, and they generate energy, but cancer cells don't have mitochondria. They can't generate energy. They need energy from the stuff that's around them, like your blood and your plasma and everything else. And so, of course, if you're on a diet that's got lots of glucose, then your cancer cells have lots of food. Yeah. So
it's amazing when you dig deep into the root cause of many illnesses and diseases, and you're like, oh, it's glucose fed. Oh, maybe I should cut the carbs.
And funny, and this is a slight tangent again. I just picked up a new car, and company car, and the chap who dropped it off, I said, "Have you got somebody picking you up?" He says, "No, I'm going to go back to the Leeds train station, and I'll get a train back to Doncaster." So, oh, okay, I'll drive you there. I don't want you catching the bus. We're driving there, and I said, "How are you?" Because he looked like he wasn't particularly metabolically healthy. And he said, "Oh, I'm fine, but my wife has been diagnosed with cancer." I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." "Yeah, she's on meds and stuff, and the doctors have got her on a fancy new diet, actually." And we started talking, and it turned out it was a ketogenic therapeutic diet. So
that's good.
back on the carbs, of course, and cutting back on the carbs will help her body fight the cancer, because the cancer will have less food to be able to latch onto.
It's amazing. I've even heard personal experiences with Lyme's disease and it helping that. And, so like, I think because glucose feeds inflammation, and inflammation's usually prevalent in any disease and stuff like that. And so like, it's just, it's a healthier way to live when you cut the glucose and carbs.
Yeah. So on that basis, as a natural progression of this conversation, to say you were, am I allowed to use the word obese? I mean, you are 257 pounds, didn't you say?
273.
Sorry, got them around the wrong way.
I was really obese.
And for listeners who don't know what a pound looks like, that's 124 kilograms. And if I divide that by 6.7, I think it is. Don't pick on me here. That's 18 and a half stone. That is a big, that is a big person. It just helps people visualize how big you were. So that is, you were a big person. How tall are you, incidentally?
Not that tall. I'm 5'4", and so that was a lot of weight for somebody my size to carry.
Obviously, if you're 5'10", it's a bit different than if you're 5'4". So that's a lot of weight. So you were that weight. You were on your meds. You were feeling not wonderful, and then something must have triggered you to make a decision that was outside of what your doctors and so on were telling you.
Yeah, I had deteriorating health. I in 2020, I had my two of my cervical discs replaced in my neck, because I was losing the ability to hold my neck upright and the ability to stand on my feet, my legs. I was losing the ability to walk. And I also had knee surgery within a month of having the spinal surgery. And that knee surgery, I had a loose body the size of a peanut of cartilage getting wedged in my knee. So I couldn't even stand for two reasons: because my spinal cervical myelopathy, and I couldn't stand because my knee was messed up. And so at that point, at that point, when I was losing the ability to stand, I said, to myself, and I said a little prayer, I said, oh, if the surgery helps me to be able to regain the ability to stand, because I was losing feeling in my leg, and it was numb, and it was just like dead weight, like I was dragging it and stuff. And as I said to myself, and I said to God, I was like, if I regain the ability to stand and it improves with the surgery, I'm not going to waste this opportunity. I'm going to do something with it. I'm going to try really, really hard.
It's one of those things, I guess, where you realize how good you had it when you don't have it. It's, there's songs about it. There's everything. It's, that whole, when you're lying there and you're thinking, maybe I'm stuck. Maybe this is my life. I wish I could walk. And on top of that, of course, you mentioned earlier that your feet were playing funny buggers because you had diabetic. Well, that's all a lack of circulation, isn't it? So your feet were dying. That's why diabetics get their feet chopped off, amputated.
Yeah.
So there's a pretty rocky road you were heading down.
Yeah, and I think the turning point in all of that was having the abilities like to stand and to walk being taken away from you. And then just instead of focusing on all my problems, I started focusing on finding solutions to my problems. And that was the game changer. Because I had every reason why you shouldn't exercise, every excuse in the book. Like I had all the cards stacked up against me. Like if I wanted to look for excuses, I had plenty. I
Well,
had
that's right.
every one of them.
Yes, you did. No, you did. And most people would have said, it's that that theory that big people, obese people, they should just eat less and exercise more, which we all know is, well, we don't all know. A lot of people still believe that. It's rubbish. It's crap. But you had a much better excuse. You were literally bedbound, so it's pretty hard to get down to the gym and do some cardio when you're bedbound.
Yeah, but I could still stand and I could still move my legs. And to avoid the symptoms of the burning pain when I was on walks, and still to this day, because I'm still on medicine for the schizophrenia, the antipsychotics.
Yep.
I recently walked 18.2 miles.
Wow.
And guess what? Guess what was my footwear choice? You're not going to believe this.
I'm not going to say thongs, for goodness sake.
Close. Although I do have a pair of UFUs that I will put up like 10 miles in. But I did sandals. I did like elastic strappy sandals. And, they're like just like a pair of Skechers, but they're elastic and they're open-toed because I was focused on finding solutions for my problems. So I had all that burning pain, which was increased by hot weather, which made the burning foot pain worse. So I opted for open-toed shoes to walk in. And I got a few blisters, probably not as comfortable, but it's doable.
Yep. Well done. 18.5 miles is a long way. I think the best I've ever done, even when I was quite fit, was 17 miles one day. And this day and age, at the moment, if I do more than 8, my body will start complaining. So 18 miles is I take my hat off to that. So at some stage, though, you decided to change your diet. You're not just sort of deciding to exercise a bit more, but you've changed your diet as well, from what I can gather.
Yeah. Okay. So I have, during the course of my illness, I have tried just moving more and exercising and walking more. And prior to this weight loss of over 100 pounds that I dropped, I did lose 80 pounds prior, probably about 10 years ago. But this is the kicker. I never saw mental health improvement when I did that 80-pound weight loss like I did when in 2020 I introduced exercise and walking along with low carb, low sugar. And then in 2021, I introduced intermittent fasting. I saw an improvement in my schizophrenia for the first time ever. My psychiatrist in 2022, I met with her in person after just seeing her virtually on phone calls without video. And I met with her in person because I wanted her to see the changes that that were taking place in me. And she that's when she said, wow, what are you doing? Because like I've never seen this improvement of you. And it was prior to that I had lowered my medicine. And so she's amazed because like we've never been able to lower my medicine up into 21. We safely without inducing symptoms. So she was perplexed. She was confused, but curious. She was very curious. And psychiatrists want to see their patients improve, but unfortunately, they're not given the proper tools to see this improvement in their patients. And that's where metabolic therapies, ketogenic diet, exercise, and intermittent fasting come into play.
Yeah. So what made you decide to do the ketogenic diet though? What triggered you? What did you just see somebody? Did you read something? What was the trigger for that? Because
Okay.
that's a lot. That's left field, compared with, as you and I both know, compared with mainstream, that is way out there.
Yeah. So like I saw an improvement in 21 and was able to lower my meds of my geodone to like 20 milligrams. And even then it was not because I needed it. I was completely doing better. I'd put my disease into remission. And it was more of a maintenance dose because my psychiatrist was scared to completely take me off of the meds. And so I did that, but then I found that when I relaxed my diet and ate more carbs, and because you got to think, at this point, I did not know what was triggering this improvement in my schizophrenia. So, like, I relaxed my diet and ate more carbs, and stuff like that. And then I laxed on the intermittent fasting because at this point I weighed 137 pounds and I was very fit and very muscular. So I didn't have a lot of body fat. My body fat that was supplying the ketones for my mental health improvements during the course of those several years, that source of fat was gone. So like when I stopped the intermittent fasting and introduced more carbs, I saw a relapse in my diet, in my schizophrenia.
Okay.
I saw a relapse. And so that triggered a hospitalization with more meds, more ineffective treatments that weren't going to help me.
Yeah.
And so then I searched for answers. And when I was in an outpatient setting, I'd even asked my psychiatrist, I was like, I relaxed on this, on my diet, and I was doing this, I was doing so well. And I never seen improvements in my mental health before. And this is what changed. I was like, do you think intermittent fasting played a part in my mental health improvements? And he's like, I've never heard of that. And so then I did some digging and I found the Metabolic Mind channel on YouTube. And then I found a video with Dr. Palmer, and he's a great source of information for anybody in a similar situation. But I found that video and I found the reasons of why I was doing well was because the ketosis is what I needed to heal me and my schizophrenia. I needed to put my body into ketosis, and I had successfully done that with metabolic therapies, and it wasn't working probably because I needed to up the fat intake in my diet, because while I was low carb and low sugar, I was also low fat. And that was my mistake. And I realized that I needed to implement a ketogenic diet. So I sought the help of a dietitian to help me implement that, which is a new field, metabolic psychiatry. And it's what's helping me. It's what was missing from my story.
Yeah. So finding a dietitian that can help you in a ketogenic diet they're pretty rare as well. I only know one, who is my mate Mike. I interviewed him on podcast number 13, actually. But there are very few dietitians out there, of course, who will have anything to do with anything that resembles low carb, high fat. So you probably did well to find one.
I did. I found Denise Potter's team, and she's one of the best.
Okay. Thanks, Harmony. That was the end of podcast number 33. The rest of her story is on podcast number 34. So I hope you can join us If you want to know more about the ketogenic diet and how it can help you, how to do it, then I have written a book about that. It's about 200 pages long, and it's available on Amazon, and its name is the same as this podcast. Its name is See Your Toes Again. I hope you could buy that and have a read. I think you'll like it. A lot of people have read it and said that they really like it, which is great positive feedback. So thank you, and I hope you can join us in podcast 34.